So I had somebody reach out to me. They said that they were in their teens and they were asking for advice on how to kind of like take steps in order to get out of the organization. And I had made a video like several years ago now on forming an exit plan on my YouTube channel, but unfortunately on my YouTube channel, because I can't edit the videos as easily as I can here, super monotone, super boring, so I'm going to redo the video on here and then post it to my YouTube channel. So, the number one piece of advice I have for young witnesses, if they have not gotten baptized yet, is do not get baptized. According to witnesses, baptism is simply an outward symbol of your personal dedication to God. It really doesn't do anything for you spiritually. Now, the organization might try to change their doctrine on that to claim that baptism has some like magical properties, but as of now, what they teach is that it is simply an outward demonstration of a dedication that you have already made in your heart. So even if you're a Jehovah's Witness, a young Jehovah's Witness who has not gotten baptized, you don't need to get baptized. I'm assuming that you might still believe some of it, but just don't want to continue on the organization. Or maybe you're somebody who has completely rejected the teachings. There's that end of it too. But right now I'm just talking to somebody who might still believe that some of it might be true. Baptism doesn't do anything for you. All it does is lock you into the organization and allow them to blackmail you with the loss of your friends and family. The second piece of advice I would give someone is to try to form connections with people who aren't Jehovah's Witnesses. The reason that the shunning policies that witnesses have are so effective is because they not only completely cut you off from everyone in the organization, but before that, they try to prevent you from forming connections with people outside of the organization. Their goal is to basically leave you with absolutely nothing if you leave. So if you can form friendships and relationships with people outside of the organization, and if you can form trusted relationships with people who you can confide in with your fears of losing your friends and family, you might be able to have a support system when you leave. In some cases, you might even have a place to stay. One warning that I have to give, though, is that I have talked to a lot of witnesses who, when they left, they ended up in a situation where they were so desperate that they took help from people who were only there to use them and abuse them. And unfortunately, in some cases, the situations are so sudden that they don't really have time to really vet the people that they decide to live with or trust. And so they end up in abusive, manipulative, coercive situations that they don't want to be in. Unfortunately, what I've seen from a lot of witnesses is that they leave the organization and end up in these sort of abusive relationships because they really don't have very many options when they're completely cut off. And so then they experience this abuse, and then they end up going back to the organization with these stories of abuse from outsiders, and they use that as some kind of validation that the organization is the only place where there's good people. So the organization creates a boogeyman of all of the evil people in the outside world, and then they create desperate people who end up in abusive relationships who end up coming back to the organization and anecdotally confirming that that's the truth when it isn't. I say all that just to say that you can find abusers anywhere, and just try to take some time, if you have the opportunity, to vet who you are putting your trust in. I wish I had magical advice for living arrangements or finding a place to stay, but unfortunately, I don't. Sometimes, like I said, you can form trusted bonds and relationships, and people offer to allow you to stay with them until you get on your feet. And I've heard of other instances where people literally have to go to a homeless shelter or something to find a place to stay. As someone who works in pest control, one thing I would warn you about if you're going to homeless shelters is watch out for bed bugs. But like she said, you can look for low-income housing, you can look for government assistance and stuff like that, and you can explain to the person your situation, the person that you would go to talk to in any government facility, explain to them your situation and try to get some sort of assistance so that you can get on your feet. Unfortunately, a lot of JW parents prevent their kids from being able to get a driver's license or get a job before they get baptized. I hope that's not the case with whoever's watching this video, but unfortunately it might be. If that isn't the case, my advice would be to try to get a job and save some money. Obviously, the bigger financial cushion that you have when you leave your parents' home, the better off you're going to be. And if you trust your employers, you can explain to them the situation so that they understand the pressure that you're under. And hopefully they'll be understanding rather than manipulative and try to use that against you. I also didn't specify in the other video about the fact that if you are put in a position where your parents are like, we will not let you get a car or a driver's license unless you get baptized, you might be in a position where, as much as I hate to say it, you might just have to do that. If your parents are at all reasonable, you might be able to like reason with them and point out how manipulative that is, and that you don't personally feel like you're ready to make that decision yet, but that you feel like it would be wrong for you to make that decision simply so that you could have those privileges. But again, in a worst case scenario, if you know that you have no other options, then that might have to be something that you have to do, and you might have to just bear with the consequences that come with it. Unless you think that you have like a place to go and you won't necessarily need to get a job and save up a bunch of money before you leave. Like if you have a trusted friend or relative that you know they've already offered for you to be able to live with them when you leave, so you know that you have a place and you won't necessarily need a ton of money when you leave, then that is also an option. But again, I'm talking about like a worst case scenario, you don't have any other options and you need to get a job and start saving money so that you can get out. In some cases, some people have like disfellowshipped family who are like have woken up to the organization and realized that it's not true. And in those cases, you might be able to reach out to those people and ask for some help. Now, that's something that I recommend you be very cautious about, because just because somebody has left the organization, and even if they've been disfellowshipped for years, that doesn't mean that they still don't believe that it's true. So if you have a disfellowshipped aunt or uncle or even like brother or sister, but they are still a believer, and you reach out to them and you tell them, hey, I don't really believe this anymore, I'm trying to get out, I'm trying to form like a plan of how I'm going to be, leaving, they might feel obligated to reach out to your parents and say, hey, like, your kid is falling out of the truth. They're going to leave the organization and become an apostate, and that's the worst thing that could possibly happen to you, apparently. So yeah, just because someone has left the organization or was removed from the organization does not mean that they've woken up to the fact that the organization is not true. And also, I hate that I have to say this, but just because, somebody is an ex-Jehovah's Witness or something like that does not mean that they're a good person or a bad person. Just like somebody being a Jehovah's Witness does not mean that they're a good or bad person. So I had warned about like not just jumping into situations when you don't really know who the person is. If you meet somebody or are in contact with somebody who's in the ex-witness community, that doesn't necessarily mean that that person is a good person. But this last part, I was actually going to mention in my last video and forgot to mention it. But like I had said about trying to save money, try to make sure that wherever you're saving your money, your parents don't have access to it and can't steal it all out from under you. I know some people form like a bank account, and I think all the way up until 18, your parents will still have access to it. So some people take the money out of there and put it into like, I don't know, a PayPal account or something. Just try to make sure that your PayPal account stays secure and that your like password doesn't get leaked or something, or you could lose all of your funds. I'm going to use some JW terminology here, but try to live simply. If you're lucky enough to have a dollar store in your area, or even like a Family Dollar or Dollar General or something like that, you can go there and buy like silverware and bowls and cups and stuff like that for very cheap. If there is a trusted adult that you know who also trusts you, you may be able to have them put your name on one of their credit cards. Now, that's not to say that you can use their credit card, because I don't think that you should use anyone's credit card, but that will give you a credit history. With that credit history, that will give you a credit score, and assuming that that adult has paid off that credit card regularly, that will give you a pretty decent credit score. And a decent credit score will help you with renting an apartment or renting a house or even buying a house if you're fortunate enough. I'd also mentioned in the last video about getting added to a credit card so you could build some sort of credit history, and that would help you get a place to live. It can also help you get a vehicle. I've never actually used one of these, so I don't know how comfortable they are, but in a very like desperate pinch, you might be able to use one of these to like sleep in your car if you needed to. And I get that in different areas there's different types of weather, so that might not be an option, or there's different levels of crime, so that might actually be more dangerous. But again, I'm just throwing out ideas here. You might even be able to buy like a memory foam topper or something to put over top of it so that you're actually comfortable when you're sleeping. If you are living out of your car and you don't really know where you're going to go to like take a shower, sometimes if you get yourself like a gym membership, a lot of gyms have showers, so you could go there pretty regularly. I don't think that there's a limit of the number of times that you're allowed to go to the gym, so you could go there just basically to take a shower. And I get that those memberships are sometimes like $60 to like $120 or whatever, but that's a hell of a lot cheaper than renting an apartment. Oh, and obviously, I thought this would be obvious, but I should probably point it out. If you are in a situation where you live in an area where the weather is very extreme and it gets very cold at night, make sure that if you are living out of your vehicle, that you have adequate means of keeping yourself warm and alive. Warm blankets, sleeping bags, weighted blankets, whatever you need to use in order to keep your body warm and prevent yourself from freezing to death. In another one of her comments, she also brought out something else that's very important, and that is to have copies of your birth certificate, your social security number, everything that you're going to need when you start your new life. I had a friend who didn't have any of these things when she left her parents' home, and she doesn't even know if perhaps her parents destroyed the materials after she left because they refused to provide them to her. And so she had to go to the government and basically have them craft a new social security card for her, which was extremely difficult when she didn't have her birth certificate either. So if you can, at the very least, have those things written down or have pictures of them that you can eventually turn into like a PDF and print them out or something so that you have some sort of documentation, that would be good. Another thing that would probably be good for you to have on hand is like a go bag where you could have like most of your important stuff that you're going to need, documentation and clothes and things like that, already prepared so that if something happens quickly and you need to leave, you'll have that available. And fortunately, because the organization already recommends that witnesses do stuff like that, and they have like to-go bags with like food supplies and stuff like that, you could just play it off as, oh, well, I'm just, making sure that I have this go bag like the organization tells us to. You never know when Armageddon's gonna happen. Don't want to sound like Tony Morris here, but I am very skeptical of college degrees. Not all of them, obviously, but unfortunately, I know a lot of people who went to school for a really long time and ended up amassing tons of debt with nothing to show for it. And unfortunately, I don't even know what the future is going to look like, especially with AI and stuff like that. Because a couple of years ago, I would have told somebody, oh, just, try and get a job in the STEM fields, like, become a radiologist or something. And now it looks like they're designing AI that's capable of reading X-rays and MRI readouts and stuff like that way better than any human ever could. So a lot of those people are probably going to be out of the job. So I'm definitely not going to ever tell somebody don't go to college, but if you're going to go, try to pick a field where you know you're actually going to have a future. In fact, I would tell someone that if you can't get a college loan from a bank, if you can't go to a bank, show them exactly what field you're planning on studying in, exactly what you're planning on doing after you graduate, and exactly how you're going to pay them back, then don't do it. That's just my opinion. I might be completely wrong. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people in the comments telling me that I'm like over exaggerating, but like I said, I just know way too many people who got way too bogged down with debt with absolutely nothing to show for it. And there's way too many people on this app who are coming forward with their degrees saying, I got this degree and nobody's hiring. So they end up with the same jobs as other people without a degree, but they are also paying off their student loan debt. Again, I'm not telling you not to go, I'm just telling you to be cautious and to really figure out what you want to do before you take that step. And unfortunately, when you're in the organization, that's something that you're not even really allowed to think about, so it's something that you really don't have time to plan for before you leave, most of the time. I'm going to start sounding like an after-school special, but try not to get involved with drugs. I also know way too many people who got involved with some hard drugs and ended up really screwing up their lives. And again, it's way easier to fall into those patterns when you've literally been cut off from your entire social circle. That's another thing that the organization pretends is inevitable if you leave. Oh, you're going to get involved with like drinking and drugs and all this stuff, when in reality that's not the case. But like I said, when you are feeling that emotional loss, you are more susceptible to those things. We talked about the credit card earlier, but there's other ways to build your credit. You can get a secure card from the bank, and that will allow you to build your credit. I would recommend, if you're going to do any sort of credit cards, to make a purchase and pay it off at the end of the month, or at least pay the majority of it off by the end of the month. Try your best not to get yourself in a lot of debt. Another thing I would say is do not let your pride prevent you from moving forward. I didn't grow up with a lot of money, but I know that there are some Jehovah's Witnesses who did, and so like taking on a job that's like, cleaning toilets or something would be like something completely unfathomable. But if you really want to leave the organization and you want to build a life apart from it, then you're going to have to make some hard decisions. If you're lucky enough to have a smartphone and you're able to pay for service and things like that, it's probably good to download some apps from different companies or different like restaurants and stuff like that to look for deals, especially if you're worried about where your next meal is going to come from. A lot of apps let you collect points so that you can use them later, especially when you're like dealing with some hard times and money's running short. There were more than a few times that I utilized like free meals from McDonald's or free meals from Dairy Queen because I was able to build enough points from them. Anyway, I wish I had better advice, and I wish I had like a more like silver bullet way of leaving the organization without losing everything, but I don't. All I can say is don't get discouraged or don't fall into despair. You're allowed to be discouraged, but keep pushing forward and keep looking for opportunities. Even if it means you have to move out of a big city into a podunk town in the middle of nowhere in order to live a free life. Anyway, that's my advice. Like I said, I wish it was better. And if anyone else has some advice, put it in the comments, please. If you made it to the end of this video, which I would be impressed if you did.